Today is March the 14th, 1984. My name is Judson McLaury. It's Judson, capital Laury. I'm with the Historical Office of the U.S. Department of Labor. I'm conducting a historical exit interview with Mr. Thorne G. Auchter, Thorne, middle initial G, Auchter, Auchter. Mr. Auchter is Assistant Secretary of Labor for Occupational Safety and Health. He will be leaving the Department of Labor on March 30th. Okay, first of all, I'd like to ask a couple of specific questions on particular items during your era at OSHA. I'd like to kind of wrap up background on one thing very important. In 1981, you fought against massive budget cuts at OSHA of up to 15%. And I was wondering, how did you manage to succeed in doing this? And how did this budget battle evolve?
Well, frankly, Judd, I don't remember a lot about the 1981 budget battle.
For the fiscal '83 budget.
I don't remember a lot about the 1981 budget question or budget battle. But in terms of budget in general, my philosophy is pretty simple. I believe that this town moves on reputation. And that's what I've told our people time and time again. And that's what we try and pride ourselves on, reputation. That is, we are competent professionals. The reputation we put forth in the workplaces of this country is professional occupational safety and health folks. That we know what we're talking about when it comes to occupational safety and health. And it's the same sort of approach that we take in dealing with the department and dealing with OMB in the budget process. It's very important for us to convince those people in that process, those individuals in the process, that we really do know what we're doing here, that we are well managed and well run, that the taxpayers' dollars are well spent, that it really does bring a positive return. And in presenting that picture, presenting that fact, and it is a fact, we have been successful more often than not, and that's the basis for it. It's just that simple and yet just that complicated. That's what we do, and so if I've been successful in going through the budget process, and that's the reason. The folks at OMB have a role to play, which we recognize. I mean, they're the eye of the needle through which all of us who are after dollars have to pass. We have to justify everything that we're doing to the folks at OMB. I assume they're rewarded and recognized by how much fat they cut out of agency budgets. That seems to be the way they conduct their business. So we have to have an appreciation for an understanding of that. And I think we do. So when we go over there and talk with those folks, we're armed with facts and information, with programs, and the ability to define the results of our programs in terms of real documented successes.
Okay, could I back up a bit? Let me refresh you a little bit. I know this is one of many things you have to keep track of. In 1981, you were debating the fiscal '83 budget, and I've been working through the Secretary's files, doing some research there, and there were three options. There was a 5% cut option, a 10% cut option, and a 15% cut option, and you presented your reactions to the three cuts, the three levels, and you opposed the 10 and 15% cuts, particularly the 15, because you felt this would cut very severely into all aspects of the agency. And I know that OSHA didn't. In fact, the 15% cut never happened. And I just wonder if you remember any of the details of how that battle. That's what I was getting at.
Well, I don't
If
remember.
if you can call it a battle, or
I don't remember any of the specifics really. I know that as each year that we go through the budget process, we look at our program, and that when I first came here, there clearly was some fat in the agency that could be cut out, and I had my own set of priorities. My first priority was that I would not cut any compliance positions, that I had 1,200 people out there making inspections when I first came in the door, and that's what I'm going to have when I leave on March the 30th. I've protected those positions all the way through and reorganized the field at one point in order to do that, to cut supervisory and overhead positions in our field operations, to retain that number of compliance officers. I've cut the New Directions Grants program, because frankly it was an area that I mean, if you had $200 million, you could put it out in the form of a grants program, but the question is, how much do you really need to do the job? And the amount of money that we've got there now, $6.8 million, is adequate, I think, for the foreseeable future, because it's a rotating fund. It's not the same people getting the same money all the time. As soon as they complete putting together their program and their 5-year developmental period,
right,
they're off the payroll and they're fully independent of federal funding, and we go somewhere else. I cut the consultation budget for a while. Why? Because the states weren't using all the money we were giving them. That's why. We were always getting back $2, $3, $4 million at the end of the year. There was not enough demand out there for the consultation services to use all the funding. So we had some funds to cut. Now, as we have gained in spreading our reputation in the consultation program around the country, our demand's gone up, and we've gotten more funds from Congress to do that, to meet that demand, and so we're in good shape there. But initially we had room to cut, so we cut that. Every part of the program has been subjected to the tightest scrutiny in terms of budget, and in the beginning we had some room to cut, and as we have gone farther through the program, and as the pressure has grown more intense, really, from OMB to cut, we have been in a better position to state the reason why this particular agency had already been cut down to be lean and mean, trim and efficient, and why the cuts were not particularly appropriate here. That's the best answer I can give you. That the key to it is reputation. I think the folks at OMB and in the administration, in the administrative operation in the Labor Department, and in Congress, know the job that's been done here, and therefore when it comes to looking around for fat to cut and money to not spend, they know by and large they're not going to find it at OSHA.
did they know it in 1981, do you think?
No, but I think they were receptive. I mean, they were looking for proof that this agency could, or at least commitment that this agency could really produce, and I think we've demonstrated in the interim that it can.
Okay. In mid-1982, OMB asked agencies to try to speed up what they considered a lagging pace of reviewing regulations under the Executive Order 12291. And later, in 1982, the Secretary expressed his concern to several agencies. OSHA wasn't singled out, but there were several agencies that he sent a memo to, and he requested meetings with the heads of the agencies, including OSHA. I wonder if you remember, was there such a meeting, and if so, what took place or resulted?
Couldn't tell you. I don't recall.
Did you have meetings with the Secretary about the pace of regulatory review?
Well, it's such an ongoing thing, Judd. We've done that regularly since day one.
Do you remember that there was any particular concern about the pace of the review?
No. No. No, our concern, as a matter of fact, my concern and the Secretary's concern has been on the other end, that the OMB review part of the process was taking too damn long. And were there things that we could do to try and speed that part of the process up, so we could, resolve our issues more rapidly and move on to new issues, to other issues.
Okay, and also around mid-1982, OSHA was widely perceived and reported in the media, in magazines like Business Week, I think U.S. News and World Report, various places, to be changing its course from emphasizing regulatory relief to pressing businesses more to deal with occupational hazards. This is something that, as I say, it was reported. Was this a change in, was there a change in policy behind this?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, a number of the members of the media missed the point entirely. If you recall, when that was going on, they just had all the problems at EPA. And at the same time, our regulatory pace was picking up, and so some members of the press added 2 and 2 and got 6 3/4. They were trying to make the point that because heads had rolled at EPA, that I and we at OSHA were scared that we'd be in the same boat, and therefore we were going to pick up the regulatory pace. And nothing, absolutely nothing, could be farther from the truth. And what I told the media was, those folks who were asking those questions or trying to make that point, go back and look at some of my earlier statements, earlier speeches, earlier interviews, where I laid out OSHA's 4-year program under the Reagan administration. And it is a 4-year plan. It was a plan that I put together within the first 3 or 4 months after I'd been here. The first part of it was management. Get our enforcement operation in shape. We were known as an agency that was not uniform whatsoever with our enforcement program. And the reason was we didn't have any management system. So a policy might be carried out one way in Area Office A and a completely different way in Area Office B, or ignored completely in Area Office C. And the key to that uniform national policy implementation is good management. So we created and put into place our integrated management system. That was the agenda for my first year. That's what I wanted to get. It was management the first year. I told the folks that we would be working on, that is, the public and various groups that I talked with, and as I say in interviews, that it would not really be until the beginning of the third year and throughout the third year and the fourth year that our regulatory pace would become visible, because there's so much inside work that has to be done on any particular regulatory subject. You have to, in our instance, the tests that we have to meet, economic and technological feasibility, cost effectiveness, significant risk, all of that sort of thing, requires a tremendous amount of information. A lot of that has to be gathered by contractors. So we issue contracts, and the contractors are out in the industries gathering this information. That might go on for 6 months, a year, year and a half, before we'll ever publish anything in the public, or even before some of the trade press, some of the OSHA type trade press will pick up on the fact that we're looking at a particular substance or subject. So the timing of the visibility of the regulatory activity for OSHA coming out sort of mid '82 or beginning of fall '82 was strictly coincidental with the problems that they had at the Environmental Protection Agency. In fact, I pride myself on the fact that OSHA in this administration has set out a game plan and has stayed on the track, has stayed with the plan. And you know, we've had some slippages in the regulatory process, you know, where we had a target date of such and such a time and we missed it by 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, which is normal. But by and large, our overall game plan has been one that was well thought out in the beginning and has served us all, that is, we the government, we the people, we the citizens, we the taxpayers, well this whole time.
So, in a word, there was no change in policy
or
implementation.
Absolutely not.
More or less on course, and the press was merely picking up on
that is correct.
events. Mm-hmm.
I told members of Congress early on in oversight and in appropriations hearings that we had the most ambitious regulatory agenda that OSHA has ever had. I was telling them that in 1981. And that's the truth, that's the case. And it was simply that you do so much work behind the scenes before you're in a position to publish something in the Federal Register and do press releases on the regulatory process. That's all.
Yeah. Regarding the new federalism program.
No, go ahead.
In early 1982, you and the Secretary sent a memo to OMB, I believe, I have to check that, asking that OSHA's state program be excluded from the plans for the new
For block
federalism.
grants. For block grants.
For block grants.
Right.
Right.
We didn't want them to take the state plan money away from OSHA and put it in the block grant concept.
Right. Now, just for the record, was this in fact dropped from the plans for the new federalism?
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, that was not a problem.
Okay.
It was a point that was made and accepted early on.
Okay. There's a long memorandum on that summarizes the whole, but I did want to clear that point up. Okay, in November of 1982, you proposed a reorganization of OSHA, and I wasn't clear whether that reorganization actually went through.
It's done.
It is done. Okay, and what, in a nutshell, what was the basic thrust of the reorganization?
Well, the OSHA organizational structure that we had prior to that time no longer depicted the way we deliver our services. And I believe as a manager that form should follow function. So we set policies and implemented those policies and began to see very positive results from those policy initiatives very quickly, and yet our offices were not structured in such a way to deal with those particular functions that the agency was pursuing. By that I mean the agency was, when I came in here, primarily an enforcement operation. It had consultation funds and had some training and education stuff and so forth, but it was primarily an enforcement operation. It set standards and went out there and it wrote tickets for people who violated the standards. And my approach was to read the law, which apparently it had been a long time since anybody in OSHA had read the law. And OSHA was created to reduce injuries and illnesses in the workplace. That was our purpose, and that is our purpose for existence. And then Congress told us to pursue that goal through standards, enforcement, state plans, consultation, training and education. There are about 5 or 6 different places in the law where Congress told us to be the catalyst for new and innovative programs in safety and health. We were not pursuing. OSHA had never pursued that. That was one approach that we had never pursued from a policy standpoint. Well, all of those things we do today. So it became apparent to me that we needed to reorganize the agency to reflect those changes. And the reorganization does that. The OSHA's new organization shows that there are some things that where we, the federal government, deliver the services, take the action directly. And that is primarily our Office of Field Operations, the Directorate of Field Operations. And so that's federal agency programs where we've disseminated that responsibility to the field. And our area offices and regional officers are directly involved today with other federal agencies. It's not just in the national office anymore. Our Office of Field Coordination, which is our normal enforcement program.
You're looking up, is there a chart? Oh, yeah, I'm sitting right under the chart.
Construction and maritime compliance assistance and so forth. That's all direct federal activity. On the far left side of the chart, you'll see the Directorate of Federal State Operations. That's where we jointly deliver services. State programs, where we provide half the funds, the state provide half. Training and education, that's the institute and the staff in Des Plaines, Illinois. And the consultation program, done primarily through the states. So that's the difference in the charts today.
Okay, now
Form follows function today.
In a memo that I saw, you describe it as basically rearranging existing offices. Are there any significant new functions that were added?
No.
That should be noted? No,
they're not. They're not new functions particularly. We had the ability to do most of these things. I guess one of the major new offices is the Office of Regulatory Analysis in the policy shop. That's where all the economists are that do our economic analysis in the regulatory program. So safety standards, health standards, and tech support, where there's been some rearranging in internal operations, and they are essentially the same. Their responsibilities are essentially the same, but their scientific and engineering type work is funneled through the Office of Regulatory Analysis and the Policy Directorate for the economic input in the regulatory program. So that's somewhat different. And I took reg analysis out of the scientific standards on scientific directorates on purpose. I wanted them removed from that scientific engineering operation, set off to the side so they could have the economists and deal over there with the economic issues. Sort of my mini OMB, if you will. But that's
reflected. Just occurred to me.
Oh no, I would tell you there is one major new function in the agency, and that is the office that reports directly to me. I used to have 2 offices that reported directly to me. That's as opposed to directorates. I now have 3 offices, and the third is the Office of Management, Accountability, and Performance.
I was going to ask about that.
And that office runs my integrated management system, does the planning for our planning conferences, ensures that all of the SES programs and evaluations and so forth are carried out, that it tracks the objectives for the agency that we have, conducts quarterly reviews of the objectives, is in touch with the directorates to get their reports in on the objectives they're working on and so forth.
Would you consider that the single most important addition to the organizational chart?
Yes, I would. I certainly would. In terms of an office, yes. Single most important addition. I mean, the organization operation, the organizational chart itself is extremely important. I mean, you can't separate one part and say one part is more important than the whole. But that is an innovative approach there.
Okay, one other thing occurred to me. You were talking about separating out the economic analysis office from the safety standards and from the health standards directorates.
Yeah.
Is that in any way connected with the Supreme Court ruling on cost-benefit studies and separating the cost-benefit considerations from setting the technical setting of a standard?
Well, it is in my mind. I mean, certainly the Supreme Court never said that.
Because this was drawn up after the decision, well after the decision.
Yeah, the Supreme Court certainly never said you got to have a separate office to sit down and do economic analysis. But
no, but it seems
Supreme Court.
Of that.
Well, the 2 primary Supreme Court decisions, Benzene and Cotton Dust, are the ones really that told us how we have to regulate, and the organizational chart and reflects that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You had a health conference in September of '82.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see too much reported on that, but just wanted to, briefly, well, first of all, how did it come about? And secondly, what major results did it lead to?
Came about because as I continued to look at OSHA and its ability to be effective, it became very apparent to me that we were dealing with apples and oranges here, in dealing with occupational safety on the one hand and occupational health on the other. OSHA, in my time and in the Reagan administration's time, has been very, very, very effective. And the reason is we've been results oriented. We focused on the results we're trying to get to, and then sort of backed away from that to determine what tools we had and methods we had to achieve those results. You can't use the same methods for health that you can with safety. And the reason is you don't have the same amount of information. With occupational safety, you've got pretty solid evidence. You have evidence of, if something goes wrong, someone is hurt. Boom, it happens on the spot, and you can see it, and you can measure it, and you can analyze it, and so forth. Absolutely not the case when you're dealing with occupational health. With occupational health, you're dealing with lots and lots and lots and lots of suppositions. A mathematician would throw up his or her hands in disgust if they looked at the methodology that is used by scientists when they do risk assessment. There are so many suppositions, it's ludicrous, and yet That's the best we have today. That's the best we have. So,
You're
my
dealing
point.
with, you're dealing with probabilities.
Yeah, and based on damn slim logic, very very slim guesses in logic. A lot of people don't understand. A lot of people look at a risk assessment and think that the numbers are absolute, and they're not at all. The only thing risk assessments are good for is sort of a comparison. If you use the same methodology, big if you use the same methodology on substance A and substance B, it can tell you their relative toxicity, one to the other. But that's all it can tell you. It certainly doesn't tell you that 40 more people are really going to die or anything like that. It's absolutely not the case. So, with those things in mind, realizing that those of us involved in dealing with toxic substances and occupational health all want to do what's right, and we all want to do what's right in the quickest, most effective, most productive manner possible. We decided to have a health conference to see if we couldn't come up with the answers to two questions. One, what is a good occupational health program? What are the essential elements of a good occupational health program? And two, how do you measure those elements?
But I was wondering specifically, how did it come about? Did somebody requested it?
No, I decided we were going to do it.
Your decision?
Yeah, I'm answering your question.
Okay.
In safety, we
I
can
appreciate that.
We can use the BLS statistics. We can do lots of in-house analysis. We can then come out and say, okay, if you're going to dig a tunnel, if the soil condition looks like this, you got to slope it in a certain way, or you have to trench it in a certain way, you have to shore it in a certain way, so forth and so on. You can't do that in health most of the time. In health, you're dealing with nebulous data, with nebulous information, with supposition. I believe anyway, and I think most of us here believe that you need a good system to deal with toxic substances in the workplace, or potentially toxic substances. You get a can of red glop in. What do you need to know about the red glop that you just bought from your new supplier because he's $3 a can low? What do you need to know about this stuff? Well, you need to know where you're going to use it. You need to know the ingredients, or more importantly, you need to know the properties of the ingredients that are in there. You need to know how many people you're going to have working with this stuff. You need to know where you're going to use it in your process, in your plant, in your area. You need to train those people to do that. You need to monitor your workplace on occasion to be sure that they're continuing to use the stuff properly. You need a procedure in hand. If they don't use it properly, what are you going to do? How do you catch it, check it, respond to it? How do you take care of those folks? Those are the reasons for the health policy. And we, of course, published the conference, and the follow-up to the conference was a report back to the people who participated, and that was labor and management and state government officials. And then they had a chance to comment on it, and we finally wrapped it up into one package, and we published in the Federal Register. We asked for comments on it, and are analyzing those comments now. And before long, OSHA is going to publish its non-binding, non-regulatory, non-mandatory occupational health policy. This is what we think are the essential elements of a good occupational health program, and here's some ways we would suggest as to how you might measure that program to see if those elements are good elements or excellent elements, average elements, poor elements that need some work. That's the purpose behind it all.
This would be a policy that an individual firm would apply then to. Is that the idea?
The ultimate firms. The bottom line product of all of this would be, hopefully, and I think we'll have it, would be that if McClaury Industries wanted to know about a health program, Judd could walk into OSHA's area office and say, what do you know about occupational health program? And the guy in the area office would say, here's a pamphlet for you. What kind of industry are you in? Maybe you're in manufacturing industry. Okay, here's one for manufacturing. Or you're in construction. Okay, here's one for construction. That sort of thing.
Okay. During your our last interview session, you seemed to indicate or imply that you felt you had pretty much accomplished everything that you started out to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Is this at least part of the reason for your leaving the agency
Sure.
at this time?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my job really is done. There's always one more decision. There's always one more regulatory decision, one more permissible exposure level, one more policy to look at, one more congressional hearing, one more interview, one more whatever. But really, I came in here to look at health standards because the answers there are so, as I said, are so long range and so based on such nebulous information. But those things that anybody can measure today, we can measure. And most of the things we measure, we do it better than anybody else can.
Thorne, are you telling me that my next question was to be, what did you feel was your most important accomplishment? Is that what you're kind of telling me now, or is there something else, some other single item that stands out?
Oh, I think my most most important accomplishment here is a sense of accountability. OSHA is an agency today that does run with pride in its professionalism. That's true. In most of the cases, most places that you go within the agency, people feel good about working here. I'm sure there are some exceptions to that. We got 2,259 people in OSHA, so there are going to be some exceptions. But I don't think there are very many, and I don't think there are enough to affect the program, which is very important. And I think it's based on accountability. A lot of these folks were afraid to be held accountable for the job they were doing because they didn't know how they'd be measured. Once we began to measure them, and they saw the results of the measurements, hey, oh, I really am a professional. I really do know what I'm talking about. People really do see that I'm doing some good, that my profession, my chosen profession, is with honor, has a measurable rate of return. It adds to the common good. We can measure those things, and that's very different. So I think accountability is probably my number one accomplishment here, both internally and externally.
Okay, that's the positive side of things. In your last interview, we were talking about kind of Washington burnout and how do people like you survive so long here without succumbing to that. And you mentioned that, I think you said about a year and a half ago that you felt you were pacing things a little too fast and were reaching a kind of a rocky phase. And you said that at that time you made a few decisions that were perhaps not the best. Did you have any particular ones in mind? I mean, do you have any that you'd like to have back at this stage?
I've got some decisions I'd like to have
Any
back.
particular ones?
But I'll tell you, Judd, the things that come to mind, they're not policy decisions. They are, some might be sometime when I fired from the hip, and the next thing I read about it in the press. Their perception decisions, style decisions, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I think in these jobs it's very important to be consistent in your style. It's important to be patient is a word that comes to mind. That's not exactly what I mean. Maybe a better word will come. Patient is a good word, and certainly that's part of it. Receptive is another word, and that's part of it. But I believe also you've got to be strong. You've got to be strong enough to say yes to your opposition and no to your allies on occasion. And frankly, with my personality, it's a lot easier to say no to my friends than it is to say yes to the opposition. And that's what I mean, I guess, about patience and strength. You have to put personalities aside, even though others won't. Even though others try continually to attack you on personality, not on policy. When they find that they can't win a policy debate, then they go after you personally.
Do you have any particular debates in mind? There was a widely reported, I don't know how accurately, but widely reported interchange with Congressman Obie of Wisconsin back in about a year ago, I think it was.
Well, Congressman Obie and I disagree, on what direction the sun's going to come up. I mean, we disagree as basically as any two people can disagree. I don't respect Congressman Obie because I think that he lets his personal prejudices get in the way of his judgment. I have demonstrated to Obie and to anybody else who wanted to listen and look at the results of my time here that this agency is professionally run and most of the time makes the right decisions. I think we've got a damn good batting average here. Obie, on the other hand, is one of those who flies off at the handle and refuses to look at facts. And I went over and I met with him privately. He tried to cut around $4 million out of our contract budget. And I told him that if he succeeded in doing that he would bring our standard setting process to a screeching halt. Now this from a guy who was always on OSHA's back about put out more standards, address more toxic substances. He never says anything about safety, by the way. His big deal is health. And so he's not concerned about America's working men and women in the more mundane area, if you will, according to his view, of putting proper guards on the machines and being sure that if they're working in a tunnel that it's properly shored, and if they're pouring concrete that it's that there are proper safeguards so that the whole structure doesn't collapse and that sort of thing. He wants to deal in the area of toxic substances, which is fine. That's his prerogative. But I told him that if he was successful in eliminating $4 million out of our contract operations, we could no longer gather the information we needed to complete the regulatory process. Not because of anything that we wanted to do, but because of the Supreme Court decisions requiring us to have and analyze this information. He said he didn't care, it didn't make any difference to him. What he was concerned about was what I might do in the regulatory area. Not what I had done, but what I might do. As I went through the regulatory process. Well, to me, that is just an absolutely awful attitude for someone to have. That's a question of personality. I think he sort of made up his mind early on that one, he certainly didn't like the Reagan administration, and two, he didn't like the fact that I would have the audacity to disagree with him. And those kind of things are disappointing to see someone take that approach when we're dealing about some pretty serious business here. As I say, I guess that's been disappointing, and yet, from my side, from someone sitting in this office, you have to be patient. You have to continue to exercise patience and restraint with that, because for me to act in a childish way, in response to his acting childish, would have served even less purpose.
Former head of OSHA, Morton Korn, once said that you had to have the hide of a rhinoceros to succeed in the job.
And that's hard to do.
Have you developed the hide of a rhinoceros?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I've just been reading some of the editorials about me over the last week. And it almost makes me sick to my stomach that people would sit down and write the kind of trash that they've written in 2 or 3 instances, clearly having no command of the facts whatsoever, and not wanting to have any command of the facts. They haven't called this office and asked for any information on any of the subjects. They're sitting there and printing factual errors, and they run 3 and 4 and 5 factual errors together, and then consequently reach a conclusion that's based on absolutely nothing. And yet there they are sitting down writing about it, and that's been the most disappointing thing about the job. Thankfully, it doesn't happen that much.
Did you want to be more specific on that? Are you referring to the B.B. Anderson business?
Well, one of them is the Kansas City newspaper. Another one was the Atlanta Constitution. I just took a look at that and at the thing they did. Another one was the New York Times deal, and all saying things like, "Oh, it's just terrible that they haven't done anything on worker right to know. They're making the states do right to know law." Where if all they had to do was take a look at what we've done, we have passed the most far-reaching OSHA standard ever of any kind, called hazard communication. It's going to cost industry $585 million for the startup cost to comply with it. But guess what? Through our efforts, industry wants the standard. Industry has agreed that this is necessary. They're not fighting us on it. We're not in court over. They're not suing us the way industry has been so often with OSHA standards, and especially expensive OSHA standards.
Labor didn't sue either, did they, over the hazard communication?
No.
So there's no litigation pending?
There's no litigation pending that we're involved in, to my knowledge. Okay, I mean, that could have changed in the last 3 days, or there could be some case we're peripherally involved in. But it's going to cover 14 million workers, 300,000 work sites, provide information that's never been provided before. And will require the release of trade secrets in certain circumstances, both emergency and non-emergency, never been required before. And yet people like the New York Times fly off half-cocked and make these statements about it. Well, it's just, I don't understand how those people, if they take their responsibilities to the public seriously, could do that sort of thing. It seems to me they have a responsibility to actually look at the issue, to get some information. New York Times has never, through their editorial department, has never called us up and asked us for any information, never wanted to talk to anybody over the phone, didn't want to see any documentation or anything. They just sat down, wrote a piece of trash. It's no wonder to me that some of the press are falling in such low esteem as far as the public's concerned. But I will say that I've also been delighted to see and meet and know and work with members of the press who take their positions very seriously, who are extremely professional, and who have very, very quick minds. These are complicated issues. It's very difficult to sit down and get a feel for one of these issues, much less the whole agency or something, in an hour interview. And yet I've met some folks who are able to do it and who present it fairly and straightly, and I've developed a lot of respect for them.
Do these tend to be the people who work for the more technical or more specialized?
No, they don't. They tend to be the reporters more than the editorialists. That's the difference. The reporters that come in and sit down and talk with us want to know, they want to learn. Now they'll have an angle. They'll have something they're pursuing, something they're looking after. And I've been banged pretty good by some of the reporters. I got to say, sometimes it was warranted. I haven't been right all the time either. But at least it was a fair shot. I got my chance to say something, and they looked me right square between the eyes and said, "Guess what, pal? It's coming." You said so, but I'm not sure I buy it. I'll put it down here, and boom, here it came. And you knew what you were dealing with, and the story was presented straight. The editorial, a couple of these editorial types, come out of left field with no fact, no nothing to back it up, and yet, the public reads it and says, "Oh, gee, I didn't know that jerk was letting all these people die left and right." That's been the disappointing thing about it, and I can understand why folks in public service get sort of hot under the collar on occasion,
Or develop those rhinoceros hides.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I haven't done that. I mean, it still hurts to be misunderstood, and we spend an awful lot of time here trying to continue to get our message out in a way that people can understand, because they are complicated issues, and very little about what this agency does, and I suspect any other government agency does, that can be understood and comprehended in 5 minutes or 10 lines.
Well, hopefully a history of OSHA, if and when it gets published, will be a contribution to that public understanding the agency and its mission.
That'd be terrific. It sure would.
Are there any, is there any area any one area we would like to accomplish more? I know you were pretty much on track, you say, in your 4-year plan, but is there any one area that you'd like to catch up a little more if you had time?
I feel that we have, from a program standpoint, no. I think we've done all that's been humanly possible, realizing, keeping in mind that as a regulatory agency, we are bound by the court decisions. So a lot of the things that we do here today, Congress never envisioned that we'd be doing. And I'm sure Congress never envisioned that our regulatory process would average 2.5 or 3 years to, start to finish. And that's if we have the information in the first place when we push the button and start the clock ticking on subject A. So there's not a lot we can do about it. I mean, the courts have said this is what you got to do if we're going to tell folks that your standard is legal. Other than that, from a program standpoint, no. I think we've come as far as rapidly as we possibly can. And frankly, I think we're one of the few agencies that has kept up with the pace of that President Reagan has set. I think he's brought an administration that has come much farther, much more rapidly than anybody thought was possible. I think OSHA has done the same thing. I think we've kept pace with the boss. I guess the one thing I would have liked to have felt a better sense of accomplishment about was getting our message out. I mean, it just takes so much continual information and reinforcement on that information to get that opinion solidified in the public, with the public, for the public, to the public, and that's where I would like to, to continue to work.
Would that be your advice to the next OSHA administrator?
Don't ever underestimate the need to keep the public informed. Absolutely. I mean, from day one, and that's the public at large, and that is also the special interest public. Everything that we do in this small agency, there is a special interest group, a constituency that watches it like a hawk, that's vitally interested, and so forth. And when I talked about mistakes that I made early on, one of the mistakes that I had made was I didn't realize how many groups there were who wanted to be and who had traditionally been involved with OSHA's internal process. I mean, I viewed it like I would a company. There are certain things that we do internally that's our business, and certain things that we do externally. And the mix would be different for government. It might be in private enterprise, it might be 80% internal and 20% public, and in government it'd be 20% internal and 80% public. But the philosophy would be the same. Not so. Not so at all. So to keep people informed and those groups informed is really a major key. Because when they're not informed, they get scared. They think they're being left out. When they think they get scared, and when they think they're being left out, that's when they scream and yell, and then everybody starts running around in circles.
Are you referring to labor in particular? Organized labor.
Not in particular. In some instances, yes, but the same thing's true from the management side. They'll hear about something we may be thinking about and be all concerned because they didn't know about it. They didn't get a letter on it, or they weren't invited to a meeting on it or something. So
then you run into an opposite side on that. When you do try to keep everybody informed, the other side is going to scream, hey, they're making decisions in private and they're not consulting us, right?
That's why you really have to have a sense of balance about it. You do. Tough part of the job. It is.
Are there any what special loose ends are there that you're trying to wrap up in your last 2 weeks?
Asbestos. I want the proposal on asbestos out. Firm direction on the health policy.
What about ETO, EDB?
Well, those things are not loose. They're on a track that's pretty solid, and those decisions are going to be made, I think, in a timely fashion. I mean, as timely as anything is that we do around here. I'd like to see asbestos published before I leave. I'd like to sign that one.
The new,
although I can't be involved with any more decisions on it.
But the new permanent, you're talking about the new permanent.
Well, it'll be the proposal.
Proposal for what, half a fiber per cc.
Well, I ain't telling you what it's going to be for, but
sorry, I wasn't fishing there. But the emergency standard, as I recall, was for half fiber.
Emergency standard was, and of course it went down the tube last week.
Right. What, getting philosophical here for a moment, what future direction do you see for the occupational safety and health movement in this country? Do you think that it's on a track now that it should be, or is approaching a track that you see as the most productive one?
The occupational safety and health movement in this country, I think, is extremely disjointed. I don't think it's on a track. I think that there is tremendous emotionalism and political infighting that goes on the occupational health side. And the occupational health side, I think it's full of emotionalism and political infighting. I think it's very difficult to get a straight opinion from even a small group of scientists. I think there are lots of egos involved. There are questions of who's going to get to publish what, and what's that publication going to do for his or her career. And that, I think, is going to continue for the foreseeable future, once again, because you're dealing in almost pure policy. You can take these sets of numbers that these people deal with in many instances and make anything you want to out of them, depending on which side of the scientific / political spectrum you're from or in or tuned to. I think occupational safety is on a much more solid track, once again, because the data is much more solid. It's real, measurable, both in the short run and the long run. You can tell whether or not you got a good program going. So I think that's in good shape. But the occupational health area, just like the area of public health, anything dealing with toxic substances, I think is going to be in a tremendous turmoil for the foreseeable future. I think there are bloody battles to be fought yet, and I think it's going to be very difficult for the national media to understand the issues, because the issues are very, very complicated. And
you're referring now to the scientific side of
occupational health.
Of occupational health. Right. I'm thinking, maybe my question wasn't too clear. What I'm thinking of is what I mean by the movement is the broad movement of people, of labor, industry, and scientists and government, everyone that's involved in it. Do you see any particular trend from your perspective?
Well, but Judd, that is the question I'm answering, though. That's the question I'm answering. You see, the what you would refer to as a movement, let's refer to it in its broadest sense as an interest group, okay, within which there are many special interest groups, but it is an interest group that's interested in occupational health. For whatever reason, there's an interest there from the individuals and groups within the interest group. There's going to be tremendous turmoil there. I don't think that if there's a movement, it's very erratic. Because there are so many other interests involved within that: economic, professional, reputation, political, so forth and so on. And those battles, I think, are going to be long and bloody and yet to be fought.
So would you say it's more of a chaotic, formative sort of stage right now, perhaps a transitional?
I think
stage?
Yeah, I do. I
don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, I do think it's transitional, but I'm not sure that the transition is going to take, just one presidential term, or just one generation, or just one session of Congress. I think it is maybe transitional is not the word I was using. Maybe evolutionary would be the word, connoting steadier but more constant change. I think OSHA was ready for change when the Reagan administration came in and when I came in, for a lot of reasons. OSHA had been discredited for 10 years, really. OSHA in a lot of workplaces was a joke. In a lot of business communities, it was the enemy. It was viewed in a lot of places as the tool of big labor. Not being effective at the local office, just being the tool of big labor here in Washington, but not even being able to transmit that into action in the workplace. So it had so many different reputations, most of which were negative. I think that's changed. I think OSHA was ready for change. I think we have changed it. I think there are some pockets of those feelings left, but I think that the professionals in the agency and the accomplishments of the organization will continue on, certainly long after I'm gone. I mean, this ain't no one-man show here. So I think OSHA was ready for change. I think the next person that sits in this chair needs to have the stature, the background, and the ability to deal with the turmoil of occupational health issues. The management changes, my strengths and so forth are done and implemented here. And as I said earlier, I don't think that's going to go away. I think the idea and philosophy and basically the systems of accountability are institutionalized. So I think the evolution for OSHA for the future is to continue to try to come to grips with the serious questions, but very few answers in the area of occupational health. And he's going to be tugged, or she is going to be tugged from, all different sides. And once that person makes a decision, then whoever didn't like the decision is going to throw rocks, slander, innuendo, accusation, and every other low-down dirty thing they can think of, because it's a no-holds-barred game. I mean, they don't play fair, and there's very little appreciation for those who didn't get their way. I mean, it's like dealing in one sense with a bunch of kids, except the tools they play with are pretty rough. And that's what's coming, and it's going to be more so. I mean, when you start dealing with, I mentioned earlier, some of the editorial writers who they don't misuse facts, they just don't use facts to arrive at their conclusions on the one hand. When you deal with people like Ralph Nader and Sid Wolf, who ignore facts, misuse facts, misrepresent information in order to present their own view, and yet that view is given in some quarters, shrinking quarters, I'm glad to say, but some quarters, credibility. You got a problem. And while all that's going on, you've got hopefully some real facts to deal with, and then you've got some court decisions that they're telling you, giving you some guidelines you've got to work with, and those guidelines are complicated and they take time. And you've got all that worked up, and then to that little ball of wax you add Congress, which in most instances wants to do the right thing, and then you throw in an election year, a campaign year, a presidential election, and all of a sudden the tenure over there changes, and some of those folks get on a search and destroy mission. So you asked me about the track of the occupational safety and health movement for the future. I think the safety side is in pretty good shape, and I think the systems and the management approaches and so forth are pretty well set there. I think the debate on occupational health is really just starting.
One last question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but as you said, 1984 is an election year. Would you anticipate or expect that you might be spending a little time in political activity after you leave OSHA?
Oh, I would certainly hope so. I think that in Ronald Reagan we have one of the great presidents of all time. And I mean, for an individual to be great in these days and times, with where anybody who stands above the crowd is looked at through a microscope to the nth degree, and for any leader to be able to do what he's done in a shorter period of time, I think just is astounding.
Is he aware, do you know, particularly aware in any way of, and I want to phrase this correctly, of safety and health concerns? I mean, I just wonder if there's any particular things he might have said or put out on that.
Understand that it was through his personal commitment, his personal decision, that we began our new initiative in federal agency programs. It was a presentation that I made to the Cabinet Council, and the Cabinet Council was chaired by Ed Meese. It's the Cabinet Council on Management and Administration, but the President was in the chair the day that I made the presentation. One of the high points of my time here, as a matter of fact, and I used some charts and graphs and so forth to show the need, while we felt there was a strong need to address federal agency safety and health programs. He signed a directive to his agency heads, cabinet rank, setting a 3% per year annual reduction goal for 5 years in the workers' comp claims.
So he was personally.
He's personally involved in that, and
that's interesting.
And the lead-in that I used there, and in briefings to some of the staff before I chatted with him about it and the Cabinet Council about it, was that we were doing there exactly what we'd done in the private sector, based on targeting and use of data and so forth. So he's aware of that, one. And two, I just sent to his office a package of information on the accomplishments that we've had here the last 3 years, which his office had requested that I send over there. Now, whether or not he personally will look at those or a summary of those, I don't know, but I know the information will go to him in some form or fashion.
I mean, overall agency accomplishments.
Yeah.
When you talked with him at the kind of kickoff of the federal employees safety program, was there any special comments he made or any?
The agency to see if it could work. If it could work, put a system in place to let it work, measure it, instill the sense of professionalism, ingrain the use of the word accountability. And I think those things are done. I don't think this agency, regardless of whatever happens in the future, I don't think this agency will ever be run again without some measure of performance, some measure of accountability. It may not be the indicators that I have on my wall over there about our enforcement program, but somebody that's sitting in this office is going to have a method to know what the agency's doing, and they never had it before.
I think that's probably true.
I do too. I firmly believe that. We can tell you what OSHA's doing.